Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV, here bringing you a quick little mini episode on this National Signing Day, which used to be a big-time event, but as we'll talk about with our great guest, just ain't what it used to be, but that doesn't mean ASU was standing pat. Joining us now for, I believe, number 95 or number 96 on the all-time appearance ranking, Hod Rabino, publisher of DevilsDigest.com. Hod, welcome back. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Brad. Thanks as always for having me.
All right, so let's dive in. Obviously, we've talked to you, I believe, every year since the show's been around on National Signing Day. It used to be such a huge day filled with drama, a lot of potential and hope. Today, and these days, ever since the kind of early signing period in December, it's really kind of been an afterthought with just kind of some, maybe some fine tuning and a couple maybe blue chips out there. Before we dive into what ASU actually was able to do you think that this current calendar is sustainable? We've heard a lot of coaches talking about just, the hiring, firing cycle and the early signing period. Is the way the current recruiting calendar is set up kind of sustainable? And if not, what kind of changes do you anticipate in the future?
Yeah, I think in some respects it really is sustainable because in the month of December, we talk about hirings and firings of coaches. The majority of them will take place in the month of December, sometimes even before the Christmas holiday. In terms of the portal window opening, the very beginning of December, I think that's also a calendar that makes perfect sense because after the season ends, that's when players that know they don't want to be in their school and want to see greener pastures, they want to get into that portal as early as possible. So I do think that having that early signing period in December, that does make sense, and having the portal open in December, and a lot of those players, even though they don't technically sign a national letter of intent, but do just want to know before the Christmas holiday hits that they're going to be in school A or school B. So I do think it's a calendar that does make sense, that does make it sustainable. Like you said, if there's any drawback, is that the February signing day, which used to be a recruiting holiday of sorts, is just a mere footnote. But I just think in this world of college football, players, whether they're high school prospects, junior college prospects, let alone transfer players, they really don't want to wait around until January, let alone February, to know where they're going. So if they have the ability to decide their college destination in December, they're not going to wait one more week, one more month.
All right, so of course, ASU did make one high school addition to this 2024 class. What can you tell our listeners about the newest Sun Devil defensive back?
Yeah, I think Kai McDonald, when you look at the prospects in the state of Washington, he was one of the highest, perhaps the highest prospect in that state that was still unsigned at this point. And I think Arizona State has done a great job recruiting the Northwest. Obviously, they got his Seattle teammate running back Jason Brown, a four-star prospect. You look at the state of Oregon, Jaden Fortier, the tight end, was the number one player in that state. So I think getting a guy like Connor McDonald really just follows that path of Arizona State, tight ends coach Jason Mons, to be specific, doing a great job recruiting that territory very well, a recruiting territory that I don't think ASU, over the last 20, 25 years really has done remarkably recruiting the states of Washington, states of Oregon too. But now that they're able to get players of that caliber, that is definitely some turning of the corner in that aspect. When you look at Kai McDonald, I think what the coaches like about him, that he's very versatile. I mean, I think he might line up initially at nickelback so that you can figure out live after Jordan Clark to see who's going to start at that role, what the depth chart is going to look like. But Kai McDonald is somebody who can play safety, who can play corner. And with some of the departures in recent weeks, Josiah Cox, Lennox Lewis, to name a couple, I think it was important for ASU to replenish the players in that role. And I think Kai McDonald is really one hell of an addition, especially this late in the 2024 recruiting cycle.
So obviously, he, as of right now, has put a cap on the 2024 recruiting class, but ASU was still making a big addition that same night, a little bit later on in the evening through the transfer portal with offensive lineman Jalen Clem. It's a last name that might be familiar to a lot of football fans at both the pro and college levels. What are the Sun Devils getting a lot in the trenches with Jalen Clem?
Yeah, I think every time you get a son of a coach, I think chances are you're going to get a pretty solid player. Jalen Clem is somebody who went to high school in Pennsylvania because his dad was a Pittsburgh Steeler. He did sign with Kansas State, ironically a future Big 12 opponent for ASU out of high school. Spent only 1 year there, did redshirt, then transferred to the University of Washington, where he played at one of the best teams in the country, obviously. He did play 7 games in a reserve role. But when I talked to him after he committed to ASU, he just talked about how valuable that experience was for him. And, maybe you look at the depth chart of the University of Washington, where Clem, especially as a newcomer, was a little lost in the mix over there. Now he comes to Tempe as somebody who has a legitimate shot to start at left tackle. He stands at 6'5", 281. I would expect him to be closer to 300 pounds when the season begins. But, you and I have talked many times over the last several weeks, several months, how dire of a need in the recruiting class left tackle was. I know they did add a pretty nice addition in Josh Atkins, a left tackle who started multiple games at the University of Hawaii. But I just think that a running theme with this recruiting class is really just to bring as much talent as possible in each and every position, and let spring practice, let fall camp really determine what the depth chart is going to be like, but just knowing that ultimately you're going to have the best competition level. So when you bring a guy like Clem into the mix, battling Josh Atkins, another newcomer, battling Bram Weldon, a returning player, you start to see some real competition going on left tackle. I'm not saying that Clem is somebody who's a shoo-in to start at that role, but I don't think it's going to surprise anyone, again, with his bloodlines, that he just might be the starter on August 31st.
So, of course, we broke down the addition of McDonald, and obviously in December, ASU was able to ink a number of very talented guys on both sides of the ball that we broke down on our signing day episode there. But, as we stand right now, as we record this on this February period of National Signing Day, do you expect this 24 class to be kind of wrapped up, or do you think there might be some room here in the future? Because obviously, of course, this is just signing day, the opening of a period that players can still sign.
Yeah, you really just have really concurrent calendars going on here. So in terms of signing players out of the high school or even junior college ranks, you can pretty much do so until fall camp. I think it's up until April 1st that if you do add a player from those ranks, they actually do have to sign a national letter of intent, which binds them immediately to the school. Anytime after that date, when they do sign, it's what's called the grant in aid form, where it's a form that only binds the player once they actually enroll in classes and start participating in classes at ASU. But then you have also the transfer portal window of April, going to be the last transfer portal in this cycle, that opens from April 15th and ends on April 30th. And Kenny Dillingham said that he does not want to, quote unquote, live in the April portal, which means that he is not expecting to really add a plethora of players in that window. I think he and the staff have done a really good job in December addressing all those positions, having over 20 transfers alone, just under 20 recruits from the high school ranks. So you really just can't see ASU going into the April portal and signing 7, let alone 10 players. I think it's just going to be just a very, very concerted effort on, okay, what positions do I actually need in that portal? And I think that the whole theme of really adding as many bodies to the trenches is going to continue in April, again, on a much lower scale. So I could see that, maybe 1 or 2 offensive linemen, preferably in the tackle positions, maybe 1 or 2 defensive linemen, preferably interior in the tackle positions. And tight end, I think, is one position that maybe not so much under the radar ASU needs to address. It did try to address that in this recruiting cycle out of the high school ranks, but it did not work out for them. So I definitely see them trying to address that in April. Jaden Fortier, the incoming freshman that I talked about a few minutes ago, the top player in the state of Oregon, did actually tear his ACL in the state championship game. So even when fall camp begins, I don't know if he's really going to be are participating without limitations. So for ASU to add a tight end that would mark, I guess, a fourth healthy tight end that can start full camp without limitations. I think that's one area that's really going to be imperative for ASU to address. So that is another position that I would see there. But honestly, Brad, I don't think ASU is really in a position to turn down the quote unquote best available player that might be in the portal. So if there's just an absolute cannot miss wide receiver, running back, defensive back, linebacker, I don't think ASU is really going to just ignore it and just move on. So sure, there's some other areas that are dire needs, like I said, offensive line, defensive line, and tight end. But I don't think anybody should be shocked if ASU adds a player that may not constitute a position of need, but when you look at the caliber of that addition, sometimes you just have players you really cannot pass on. So I would not preclude ASU from taking that approach too. But all in all, it's hard for me to see more than a handful of players being added in that April transfer portal.
So obviously they've done some pretty good things so far in the transfer portal, and as you mentioned, might be doing some things, some fine tuning here in the end of April. But when you look at this 2024 recruiting class in terms of just like the high school signings that they have done so far, kind of top to bottom in a 30,000 foot view, what do you think are the overall strengths of this class, as it pretends for the future, and also maybe some areas where they could have done better?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that when we look at areas of strength. It might be like easier to say which areas of weakness you have, because I think, again, when you go back to the offensive line and defensive line, maybe you like to see one or two more offensive tackles, somebody that does have, a nice resume to their name. Same thing with defensive tackles on the other side of the ball. We talked about tight end, but really when you just exclude those three positions, I think ASU did a great job beefing up their experience level and talent level at linebacker and the defensive backfield. I really do like a lot of the additions over there, especially from the transfer portal. You look at running back. I think just adding a four-star guy out of high school in Jason Brown, adding Raleek Brown from USC, somebody who was a five-star prospect out of high school. But I think those are just really, really quality additions at an area that some people may not think was a great area of need, but still an area that also really needed dynamic playmakers. And I think when you got a guy, especially a guy like Raleek Brown, that can really help you quite a bit. You look at a position like wide receiver, and they're really so well stocked over there. They've really had to get a can't miss, prospect. And I hate to use that term again, but but the point I'm trying to make is that if you are going to add to a well-stocked position group as wide receiver, it just has to be just one player that you just feel it's not even just really even taking a flyer on, but somebody you absolutely would like to see part of the roster. So I don't think it's an area of weakness at all. But at the same time, if something did fall into the lap in the April portal, I really can't see them passing on that. But overall, like I said, I really like the way they constructed this roster, and if they can just really add those few pieces in the April portal at defensive line, I think they'll be fine. One thing you have to keep in mind is that they're really going to have potentially some treacherous waters to navigate when it comes to meeting the 85 scholarship limit. And the reason I'm mentioning this, Brad, is that you always have that X factor, dark cloud, however you want to phrase it, of the upcoming NCAA sanctions. And we fully expect the scholarship number for ASU to be reduced, but maybe just by a couple of players, give or take one. And when that does happen, and now you figure all the attrition post-spring practice and all the additions they could bring in the April portal, are the numbers going to be exactly at 85? Or are the numbers still going to be at 82, 83, maybe giving you that breathing room that you'll have to afford yourself just because of the NCAA sanctions? Another aspect is those NBA sanctions, which, as we all know by now, are negotiated continuously between ASU and the NCAA. Do those sanctions actually only take place for the 2025 class? Because here we are almost in the middle of February, and we still don't have any resolution on that. And it might be just a little too harsh on a school like ASU, a school that we all know has offered one sacrificial lamb after another to the NCAA, hoping for a lighter punishment, now to deal with reduction to scholarship numbers for the 2024 season when you're just about ready to begin spring practice in March. So those are some other factors that really come to the equation over here. But I think that all in all, whether ASU is allowed to start the 2024 season with 85 scholarship players, or maybe they are forced by the NCAA to start with as few as 82 scholarship players, they're definitely going to make the numbers work. And I don't think it's really going to behoove them not to go hard in the April portal, especially when you start talking about adding a handful of players or so.
So obviously some of those transfer portal guys are going to be looked at to be kind of plug and play, or at least, very quick impact players. When you look at the high school guys, though, which of the high school signees do you think has a chance to be one of those immediate impact guys and see early playing time?
Yeah, I think I mentioned Jason Brown, the running back from Saddle Adea. I do know that ASU does have a good returning nucleus in Cam Scadaboo and DeCarlos Brooks. But I just feel that, a guy like Jason Brown is somebody that can definitely make an impact, right away at running back. So that's one player that I do expect big things out of. If I'm moving to the other side of the ball, I would say that maybe a player like Tony Lee in Cuba, somebody who I think might line up at safety, but probably could play corner. He's the other four-star prospect that was signed in this class along with Jason Brown. And I think when you look at a defensive backfield that is more physical and more athletic than it was last year, I think Nkuba is one player in terms of a newcomer, so the high school ranks, that you can probably point out and be, maybe somewhat surprised if when August 31st rolls by that he's not in the two deep again. It could be at safety, could be at corner. But, those are two players that really jump out me right away as being immediate impact players, and players that I would be somewhat surprised if they end up playing 4 games or less and thus redshirting.
Kind of on a related note, some of those high school guys that you think might be some diamonds in the rough might take, a couple years in the program, but over time could emerge as having some great value.
Well, one local guy is Ramar Williams, who was recruited as a defensive end. And if anybody just even casually followed his high school career locally, he's somebody who lined up a lot at tight end and scored quite a bit of touchdowns for his Eastmark Mesa High School. So I think that that's one player that, call it a diamond in the rough, or just call it a good investment for the future. That's somebody that I just feel just has so much athletic ability that he can really be somebody who might end up being a cornerstone of that defensive line. So that's definitely one player I look at. And when I look at a tight end, and again, I know I mentioned that name already twice in this conversation, but Jaden Fortier, I know it's somewhat of a wet blanket, if you will, that he got injured so late in the year with ACL tear that you just know you're not going to see anything from him in the 2024 season. But I would say not even fall 25. I'd say spring 2025. Look out for his name, and to be one of the players that I think should dominate that period of practices for the Sun Devils. That's an absolute gifted tight end. You talk about another two-way player. Not only was he voted the best player in Oregon and obviously the best tight end in that state, he was also voted first team All-State at outside linebacker. So players like that really are just the jack of all trades in high school end up being pretty good, if not very good college players. So Jaden Fortier, again, if you're talking about somebody who may not necessarily show anything in 2024, but 25 could be a whole different story. When you look at that side of the ball, in terms of newcomers, that's definitely one player I would point out.
And this coaching staff has repeatedly pointed to the 2025 class as kind of maybe the first year that the full effect of the relationship building since they've been here is going to start to take, kind of fully blossom. Do you feel that that's kind of an accurate timeline, that this, the seeds and the work that they put in and planted over these since they arrived a couple years ago, or a little bit over a year ago, are finally going to get those big time classes in the 2025 recruiting cycle?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I know it's a very worn out cliche that recruiting is all about relationships, but it's an absolute truth. And if you are Kenny Dillingham and you came here at the end of the calendar year in 2022, you pretty much really can't establish any relationship with high caliber 2023 recruits and expect them to be on your campus. And even if the 2024 recruits, you don't have that classic 2-year cycle where you're pursuing in earnest a player and really building those relationships. So that's why 2025, from a realistic standpoint, is really the recruiting class that I think ASU is looking at, knowing that they can and really should, make a splash and maybe have it be, I don't know if it's a top 25, or maybe top 30, top 35, class nationally. I also think, and Kenny Dillingham alluded to this in one of his recent interviews, that he does want to have a recruiting class that number-wise is going to be larger than the number of transfers that he does add. I think he and the staff do a great job of adding transfers that do have 2, sometimes even 3 years of eligibility left. So you can say in many respects, it's almost like a quasi, recruiting class from the high school ranks when you bring somebody on board and they have 3 years of eligibility instead of just 1. But I think just all in all, they definitely want to get more of their additions from the high school and maybe even junior college ranks here and there, rather than the transfer portal. So I can see the ASU coaches doing a better job in that respect. Again, with the 25 class, time was on their side to build those relationships. We know that they're excellent recruiters on the staff. So I think the plan all along was really to make a splash in the 2025 class. Not necessarily really just landing players that in mass are going to be really impact newcomers in that year, but just really maybe build, I would say, a new foundation, because by the time the 2025 season rolls by, you might lose a good number of current players that really were impactful players for the Sun Devils. So you like to have a good class of freshmen, maybe not being everyday starters, but at least being a mainstay in the 2 deep. So I definitely expect the 2025 class to really create more of a splash when you talk about the high school ranks compared to the 24 class, let alone the 23 class.
Well, there certainly is no off season of football, and the Hoops squad is certainly going through some interesting times. Baseball's about to start up. Hod, tell our listeners what all's going on in the huddle at DevilsDigest.com and how to follow along with all your great work and all the great work that your entire team is putting out.
Yeah, like I said, Brad, when it comes to football, there's definitely no shortage of topics to discuss, and we're going to really delve into the roster picture, in more depth, just to see what ASU has at its disposal, what it still needs to add. I also do a series of articles called "In My Own Words," where I talk to some of the ASU newcomers and really have the fans gain some insight into their football journey. What in specific do they like about the recruiting process with Arizona State? What's the vibe now that they've been on campus for about a month and a half? And just really get to pull the curtain and just to see what is really life as a newcomer in Tempe. So we're going to be engaged in that. Obviously with a continuous coverage of ASU basketball. Like I said, definitely some tough times going on right now, and we'll see if they can get this cart out of the mud and get back on the winning track that they did had to start out Pac-12 play. As you mentioned, baseball. The Pac-12 poll just came out today. ASU is ranked number 6. I think a fair ranking, but maybe this is a team that if their freshman arms can really come to play and strike gold sooner than expected, then maybe this is a team that can actually finish much closer to the top 4 in the conference. So that season, first pitch is right around the corner, and we wrote several articles about the baseball team, and obviously we're going to have continuous coverage of that season. And we know we talked about spring practice starting much later this year at the very last week of March. But obviously, we're going to have a series of articles, not only previews, but just really try to identify some specific aspects, some specific players that we're going to take a really closer look at and see if they can really make their mark. To your point earlier, really shore up some of the deficiencies that did reveal itself in the 2023 season. So, all in all, there is definitely not going to be any shortage of topics on any sport that is ASU sports to discuss in the upcoming weeks and months.
Definitely join Joe and I in the huddle. Hod and his staff do a tremendous job in keeping everybody updated and breaking the news before you all see it elsewhere in the huddle on devilsdigest.com. Thank you, Hod, for coming on and talking some National Sign Day in this kind of new trimmed down form. Always some intrigue, though. And folks, we'll be back next week. Joe and I will be talking Sun Devil baseball.